information age businesses and women building business. And this is how I got into the internet. I kind of fell into it because my job was to grade business plans on the internet. And I remember turning to the professor, I said, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I'm grading these businesses and I don't know what it's like to run an internet company. I don't know what these business plans are about. I can kind of use my basic logic. And I said, but it's really interesting to me. You know, I like the job, but I'm not really sure that I'm qualified for this. And it dawned on me to say, maybe I should get a job in the internet space. This was kind of in the 90s, and it was all really exciting. It was before the bubble burst, and I said, okay, I think I'll do that. And after maternity leave, I said to my professor, I think I'm going to go look for a job. And I ended up at this company that didn't have a name, didn't have a cell phone. We didn't even have phones. We were working at the founder's house. We didn't have computers. We had to bring our own laptops. And at that time, there were those clunky big laptops. And I was like, ugh. And I took this house, and it was You Promise. Many of you probably know it, and helped families save money for college. And I found a home because it was about a company that cared about families. And it was also a creative group of people. There were a lot of Harvard Business School grads, too many type A's actually in hindsight, but it was a great learning ground for me. And so I was there for 5 years. And I did kind of my general management tour of duty. I entered with a JD MBA, with a very entry-level position, took half pay. I went from $150,000 to $70,000 pay. And because I wanted to learn, I was just so passionate, and I know I'm like, you know, thinking like the cost-benefit analysis of supporting my family, and I figured, I gotta go do this thing. I have to learn, and it's such a rare opportunity. And so I joined this company, and I did product management. Wasn't a director title, wasn't a VP title coming out of Harvard Business School. And I know some people want those kinds of things, and I said, you know, it's okay, I'll trust this. So I kind of took that entry-level job, and then I started to realize that to be in an internet company, you need to be a technologist. So I got offered the job by the CTO, who is my wonderful mentor today, who taught me all about technology, was very patient with me, and I managed a tech team. I didn't know anything about technology, but one of the things about me is I love being a student. I learned a lot about different things. I learned about JavaScript and HTML, and I learned about code, and my job blended consulting and also blended my consulting background and blended my creativity. And it was to solve how to integrate major companies like GM, AOL, AT&T, you name it, like big companies, to calculate these rewards for spending at their different locations, you know, Staples, Best Buy, 19,000 grocery stores. And how are you going to convince GM to integrate this technical project of this little company called You Promise to calculate a reward off of a car that was purchased at a dealership? I love that. I was like, oh, I could do that. That's kind of fun. Because I had to learn a combination of technology and solving problems, right? And I would go and fly to GM, and I'd say, how about we do this? How about we use a dealership network? Because I would ask all these questions. It was like, that works. And so that's what we were able to. And I learned about vehicle identification numbers, and 16-digit long number, and what each number represented. And it was always so interesting because it felt like consulting. But then after technology, I was there for a year, and George Bell, who ran Excited Home and Excited Imploded, was asked by the founder to join You Promise. And I remember this was kind of the change potentially, and I didn't even know that this was a career supporting move. I guess there's career limiting move and there's career supporting move. He had joined the company, and I was responsible for launching content management and getting something up on the web because I was in the technology team. And I had said to him in a meeting, I don't think he even remember who I was, but my face, maybe, and I said to him, it will launch by Tuesday. And of course it missed Tuesday. So I immediately, and I had just a new baby at home because, because this was right after HBS, and I remember emailing him, and I was working these weird hours of 6 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. so I could be there after daycare to pick up my son, and it was just weird hours at the time. And I remember writing his email like 3:35, and I had to leave. And I said to him, I am fully accountable that this did not go out at the time that I promised you it would go out at noon. And I just wanted to let you know it will go out at noon tomorrow. And he pulled me in his office and he said, I've decided to promote you to VP. Well, I think my mentor helped, but he said, you take ownership, you take accountability, and I hear that you're talented about this stuff, and I need somebody somebody to run product management, you seem to understand technology, and will you work directly for me, and I'm going to make you a VP. And I was a little choked up, and I said, I don't think I'm ready to be a VP. I just kind of did this job for a year, and he's like, no, I think you are. I think you are, and I will help you get through this. I said, okay. So again, I went back home to my husband thinking, I don't think I'm ready for this job. But he said, no, you are. So he suddenly gave me product management, he gave me creative services, he gave me eventually conversion marketing, and he gave me all these different responsibilities. And I remember people looking at me with just years of experience saying, who are you? What, and I had to suddenly, I had to get an executive coach. I was kind of really running things and not really clear about what I was capable of, and truly self-aware that I needed to get help from someone to gain that confidence that I could do this job. And thankfully for wonderful mentors who believed in me. I worked there for 5 years, and I managed most of the operations by the time I left, if you promise. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience, and from all aspects. And what I really fell in love with was data. And I felt that I geeked out on data because it, for me, and maybe that's my legal side, and I realize I use this all the time in running a company now, is that logic is so important, whether it's finance or whether it's marketing data, in driving decisions and in also conversing with people. And You Promise taught me that. It taught me the power of data, and the internet allowed me to capture that quickly with the combination of creativity and the combination of the power of branding and user experience. And that left brain, right brain was something that I enjoyed, and I kind of combined that. But then I invested. I was there for 5 years in You Promise and felt like I'm not going to be CMO, I'm not going to be COO. Very experienced people in this company. I was VP of product and marketing. And I went to my mentor, George Bell, and I said, I think I'm gonna go into freelance consulting. And he thankfully was a great mentor, and he said to me, you can't do that because it's too risky for you to support your family. And we had just a recent death in my family. He was a very close friend now, George, and giving me advice for all these years. And he said, take another job. And it was the best advice that anybody could give me at that time, because it would have been too risky for me to kind of, be the breadwinner for my family and start something at that time. And it's not like You Promise had sold yet. He said, wait for that to happen, but for right now, take another job. So I got an offer from a job at a company called theladders.com in New York City. Now, another personal dilemma came up, but it was a terrific offer. Beautiful apartment in the city, great salary, great package. My family was here in Weston, Massachusetts. And my husband's brother had just passed away. And I looked at him and I said, should I take this job? And he said, yeah, you should. My husband said, take this job, take this job. And so for 10 months, I commuted back and forth 5 days a week. And how hard that was. And I,
Wait, they commuted from Boston?
New York and Boston. And, they got me a beautiful apartment that overlooked Brooklyn Bridge that I never saw because I was always working and flying back to Boston. So it was all such a beautiful, cushy job. And I will say, I loved that company, loved my job. But, a push came to shove. What we had agreed between the CEO, which was a friend of mine from Harvard Business School, we were in the same section. The agreement was I'd try it out for a year, and if I fell in love with it, I'd sell my house in Weston and move. And so we were about to put our house on the market here because I love my job, and we were about to put a down payment on an apartment in New York City, and my son decided, my older son decided, I don't really want to go to school in New York City. I'm going to apply to boarding school, and I was supportive of it because I went to boarding school as a child, and he got in. He got into Phillips Academy in Andover, and I then looked at my husband. That means I only see him 4 times a year or 5 times a year. I didn't know about that. And then what really kind of threw me off was then I went into, we had found a place in Tribeca, and we were looking at PS 234 or something, great public school. And I visited the public school, which is the best in New York City. I'm not trying to criticize, but we were Weston, he was happy, he was doing everything. I remember going down and sitting on the edge of the sidewalk, and I bawled to tears again. I said, what am I doing? Am I doing this for the right reasons? Each time in my career, that gut check, I did, and I said, I cannot do this. I cannot do this for my family for the reasons of because I love my job. because no one else was moving for anything else.